So imagine you sit down with someone on a Friday night to watch a movie, and then for 2 hours you sit there and watch the entire movie shot in slow motion. You'd probably finish the movie and look at each other and be like, that sort of sucked. And that's kind of what it's like here on YouTube. Slow motion's kind of like a very YouTube-y thing. Not to say that my opinion trumps all or that it's like a good or a bad thing, but if your aspirations lie in being a part of movies, documentaries, TV shows, commercials, you're not going to be leaning very heavily on slow motion. But I totally get it. Like, slow motion looks absolutely incredible. Like, it allows us to see the world in a way that our eyes could never do on their own, but too much slow motion kind of takes the magic out of it. Realistically, you need to be picking and choosing those moments that you're going to shoot in slow motion versus those moments that you're going to shoot in real speed. And no, you shouldn't just be shooting everything in 60 frames per second and taking that and dropping it in a 24 frames per second clip and not slowing it down if you choose to, because it doesn't look good for a variety of reasons I've already covered in a separate video that you can check out later. And I know it's like super stressful picking and choosing like what shots you're gonna shoot in slow motion versus what shots you're gonna shoot in real time, normal 24 frames per second. But giving yourself a general guide of what you should be shooting in slow motion, what you shouldn't be, will help alleviate some of that stress for you. So like anything in a creative sphere, decision-making is going to be basically based off of preference. But this is how I personally choose between shooting slow motion and shooting for real time. So really the main use of slow motion films, documentaries, TV shows, whatever, is going to be for emphasis. Slow motion is a proper tool for emphasizing a moment, an action, an expression. So this is why it's important for you to have a general sense of what your edit is going to be up in your head before you start going out and shooting, no matter what it is you're shooting. So while you're playing your shot list or going through your shots, think about what moments really stand out as points of emphasis to really draw your audience into your film. This might be a close-up, slow motion shot of your main character's face as they react to whatever is happening in the distance. It could be slow motion of an important action to build tension in your film, like someone like slowly reaching for like the self-destruct button before the timer goes off. It could be to shoot portraits of your subject to capture their expression and to show their heroism. Maybe it's like a slow motion of an explosion because you want to emphasize the flames going up. Slow motion is an awesome tool for emphasis, but the problem is when you overuse it, you're taking the juice out of those moments that you really do end up wanting to emphasize the most. If everything is in slow motion, it's gonna be super hard for your viewer to be able to distinguish what it is you as a filmmaker are trying to evoke as important. So moving on, another thing that is super important for me when making a decision between slow motion and real time is going to be my frame size. Is your shot a wide? Is your shot a medium? Or is your shot a tight? If your shot is a wide establishing shot, slow motion for me is probably off the books. Unless there is something zipping through the scene that you want to emphasize, slow motion doesn't really play like a significant role in shooting wide shots. In a wide shot, everything is going to appear smaller, which means everything's movement is going to appear smaller. So when you put those small movements in slow motion, it's going to almost seem like nothing is moving inside your frame, and it's going to kind of end up looking like a photo. And then for medium shots, they kind of fall into the same category of, usually I'm not going to slow these down because my medium shots are usually shots that I'm using to move my story forward. The exception would obviously be if you're looking to build tension, say like you're filming a horse race and horses are like slowly crossing the line at the same time in a medium shot, then maybe to build tension, you would want to slow that down. But if it's just like an action that you're following of someone brushing their teeth or walking through a village or something, maybe that's not something you necessarily need to slow down. So your tight shot is where things are going to start to get interesting with slow motion. So opposite of your wide frame, anything in a tight frame is going to appear larger. So any of its movements are going to appear much larger within your frame. Sometimes that tight movement will feel a little too hectic, a little too unbearable. And in those times, maybe I will decide to slow things down. And your tights are going to be where you're able to emphasize the look in someone's eye, their smile, the way they're reacting to a certain situation. So for example, say we're filming a runner and our runner is warming up by stretching, not moving a lot. So our tight frame isn't super hectic. It still wouldn't make sense for me to slow down that tight frame because there's not a lot of motion. And also it's not a moment that I'm necessarily looking to emphasize, but it is moving our story forward. So I'm not gonna slow that down. But maybe when our runner is now done her run, she's finished, she's breathing heavily, she looks out into the sunset, and that's a really keen moment that you wanna get your tight shot nice and slow to emphasize the expression on your runner's face and capture that magic in that moment. That's definitely a moment that I would slow down that footage in order to create emphasis within my film. And then moving on, another situation that affects whether I'm deciding between slow motion or real time is going to be how slow motion affects the realism of your film and how that affects the way that your audience is able to connect with your visuals. Slow motion makes things look extraordinary. But then at the same time, as human beings, we're not used to seeing the world in that extraordinary fashion. So it's really difficult for human beings on the subconscious level to actually connect with that extraordinary looking visual. Take this scene, for example, from my latest short about Odeki Dan, a filmmaker in Entebbe, Uganda.
For every smile you see, every tear you see, every sad face, any happy face you see in Entebbe, there's a story to tell.
Like, it feels so real. It feels like you're in that room with Dan, going through these actions with him. You've probably been in that situation before where you're sitting on the edge of your bed, getting your gear prepped and ready. You're feeling all these feelings of nervousness. You're hearing the clicks of your camera. But if I would have shot this in slow motion, it would have taken you out of that scene. For one, the audio wouldn't have been synced. When you're shooting in slow motion, you're not getting audio sync, so you're not getting that real-time audio that allows you to connect to an extra level to a visual. Seeing and hearing someone laugh at the same time is so much more powerful than a slow motion shot of someone laughing and having the audio not actually sync up with that clip. But also there's cases where you don't want your film to feel real. You don't want there to be realism. Take music videos, for example. You're able in music videos to pretty much break any rule that there is and bend the border between what is real and what is not. But for something that's super real, like a documentary, you don't want to disconnect your viewer by taking them out of that realism. So if you're trying to just like make life easier for yourself when you're shooting like a corporate video or a wedding and you just like shoot everything in slow motion, just like to extend the clip as long as possible, by all means, go ahead and do that. Like, I'm sure the person paying you to make whatever that is will be ecstatic with whatever you make, honestly. But if you want to build a coherent story in your film, whether you're shooting narrative, a commercial, a documentary, you need to have a reason for shooting slow motion. But at the end of the day, like, do whatever you want, like, do whatever makes you happy. Again, this is all my personal decision making and my personal preference. But just know when it comes to buying your next camera, like, don't harp so heavily on, does this camera have 4K 120? Because most of the time, it's not gonna matter. Hope that was helpful. You're a star. I love you.